If there's a show on the television and you're the one, okay, let's just.
Oh my God, this is really.
Back to one.
Back to one. If there's a show on the television and you're the one with the perfect vision for how to write it and shoot it and cut it and post, then you're the showrunner and this is your show. The Showrunner Show. The Showrunner Show. The Showrunner Show.
Wow. So anyone out there just listening, I highly recommend going to the video of that one. That was really excellent. Really working the frame there, Stace. I like it.
Yeah, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Showrunner Show, everyone, where every week we demystify some aspect of the job of showrunning for anyone who works in TV, who wants to work in TV, or just wants to know how it's all made. I'm Drew Dowdle.
I'm John Eric Dowdle.
And I am Stacy Schaboski. Thank you so much for joining us. It is a delight to have you here.
This week, we wanted to give you some tools for managing studio and network notes. No matter how great your script, vision, show is, it can always be better. And studios and networks are there to help you make it better. How you manage this process will not only lead to a better show, but will lead to a better career. Like, Drew and I, as we were coming up, we would, work with people pretty well, I'd say. And we'd see our peers like, you can't tell me what to do, Suits. And people who had like big hits, we'd be like really envious of like, oh man, that person had a huge hit. We did, we got a base hit, and that person got a huge hit. But because they were difficult and we were good partners, we got to keep going in our career. And we've seen a lot of incredibly talented, incredibly smart people sort of fall by the wayside over time because this process was, mismanaged and people were treated as the enemy for trying to help. And often we'd see objectively, subjectively, I guess, from the outside, like, no, the studio is actually giving this person great notes, but this person's like, F you, you don't know, you don't know what this really means. And you'd be like, yeah, but they're right. But it would be so much better if you listened a little. And we wanted to just talk through some of that.
I think the intention of network notes and studio notes are always to make the show better. And not all of them will. Sometimes it really becomes a skill to be able to decipher between the two. And I think, but mostly it's, I think sometimes you go into a creative process thinking they just want to like put their fingerprints all over it and they just want to like take what's mine and make it theirs. And I don't actually, after, several seasons of TV now, I don't actually think that's the case. I don't think the purpose of notes is to, kind of dilute the vision. I really think the intention is almost always pure. And sometimes it's not, delivered the right way, or sometimes an executive isn't really a writer, so their notes don't really work, but I think the intention is, you could generally trust the intention of the notes and not see it as a conflict to what you're doing versus something that can be additive and something that you don't have to, do 100% of, but like the intention is to make it better. Like you said, John.
Yeah. I think the note behind the note here is that just notes in general, first of all, there's going to be a lot of them. That's just part of the process with TV.
Yeah.
Yep.
But that for the writer, for the showrunner, for the person taking the note on the receiving end of the note, it's very emotional and it puts you on the defensive. Like honest to God, even just the topic being about notes and the fact that we had a notes session yesterday and I've got to turn around the notes today, my hands are cold, my heart's beating fast. Just knowing I have a notes thing, like, makes me scared. Like, I don't know what I think they're going to do. I don't know if I think they're going to be like, Stacy, we decided you're incredibly untalented. You have to, it's time for you to give up your dream and never write again. Like, I don't know what I think is going to happen, but some part of me feels like that's possible because I get way more nervous than I should, whatever. And I suspect that many writers are the same, and that's why they act like big dumb blowhards when they're like, they're not going to dilute my vision, those stupid suits. It's like, just calm down, you're okay, everyone loves you.
If you're making your career from writing, it's inevitable that's a part of your own self-esteem or self-worth, sense of self-worth or self-value, or, some way that, I'll speak for myself, like coming up, like, I think I sought to become a writer in the way somebody who feels like something of a hole inside is like, I need to get great at this. So I have like an intrinsic value to the world. Where as I've gotten older, I've been like, oh, I have value to the world because I'm a human being and I'm, present. And, but I think so much of my self-worth was tied up in being a good writer, a good filmmaker, and every notes call was a challenge to that. And that was
because it's not just in general. It's like literally each line of dialogue. You can get. It's not like I wrote a genius one, and then I wrote one that was pretty good, and then I wrote no. It's like it's down to the line of like they want to change that line, but that's the as if every little adjective you pick defines you, which is bananas. But that's how it feels. And it's sometimes.
Like, am I worthy? Am I worthy? Like, should I really be here, or am I a fraud? It's like they know I'm a fraud. They're telling me all these things that are wrong with my script. It's hard not to do that to yourself. Or I'll speak for myself. Like, it's hard for me not to do that. And over time, I've learned to, I guess, diversify my self-worth. It's not this one thing. It's like, there's a lot of things and shit. Okay, if they didn't like that line, there's a lot of lines and a lot of things,
Yeah, that's good life advice when possible. Diversify your self-worth. So one thing I got to say, I love about, I just want to say, one thing to kind of talk about the value of notes and the Studio Network's involvement in the creative. I found over time, instead of fighting against it, we've really used it as a bit of a, backstop of like, okay, let's try something, this might be too far. This might be too much. It might be crazy, and if it is, they'll tell us, they'll tell us like, you guys went too far, and I think it allows you to be more daring in the writing in a way, knowing that there is, some kind of safeguard in place that will stop you, will save you from yourself a little bit, and to use that and not to, say, I need to deliver a perfect draft that gets no notes. You're always going to get notes. That is a given. But if you're, have kind of a flyer of an idea that either is genius or it's terrible and you can't tell the difference, like, you can try it and they will tell you. And it's kind of nice to have that, first line of defense against maybe some of your, more daring impulses, which once in a while they come back and say, wow, we love that thing. I guess that does work. And
more of that bold one. You're making me think of Joe Pickett season 2 when we were pitching the season overview. And some point really early in the process, we're like, okay, in the climax, we pictured Joe murdering someone in cold blood. And God bless them, they were like,
okay.
Not really the Joe we're seeing. Some sort of,
But they were, to that point, they said they were really helpful in like, there's certain things that maybe like we always went in and said, Joe Pickett never lies. Like, we know this, like, that is one thing that we know, he's never a dishonest person. And, but then there was other things in the city like, that doesn't seem like a line Joe would cross. And we're like, okay, thank you. You're right. You're right. And, sometimes you need to press those boundaries to get the pushback, and you kind of know where your boundaries exist at the end of the day because of that process.
Right. Yeah. They're like those little things in the bowling alley that keep you from throwing a gutter ball.
Totally. Exactly.
Yeah. You're like, white knuckling the steering wheel, and you see like one of those metal guardrails along the side, and you're like, oh, okay, I can relax a little. I'm not going to go careening off the edge of the cliff. The guardrails will bounce me back into the road if I lose control. Like, when you're driving way too fast down a mountain road, like, you're grateful for those like guardrails, and they are those. And I'll say too, like, one of the things we really try to keep a mentality of, and whether or not it's true, it's a helpful belief and something we try to instill in the room and stuff, is you can always make great changes from bad notes. Even if a note is bad, even if a note comes from, a weird place, or they're just not getting something, you can always make a great change. You can clarify that moment. You can always make a great change from that. And that really puts the power back into your hands. That's less like they're trying to ruin it. Like, when I hear people saying like, they're going to ruin this thing that we were doing that's so good, Like that mentality, you're already giving up on your own script. Like you're letting go of what could be great in your script once you start adapting that mentality, that defeatist mentality. But if you're like, I can make a great change based on this, like there's 10 different ways you can write any scene. And it's up to you to find a great way to address notes and still like maintain, the integrity of the show you want to make. And it's hard sometimes. It's hard to find that balance or to find that thing, but knowing that you can always make a great change with a bad note, empowers you to win no matter what. You can always win.
And I'd say most notes are good too. That whole thing, that's so smart. You can make a good change out of a bad note. And that is a great way to deal with bad partners. Because sometimes you do end up with partners who aren't respectful, who just are addicted to giving notes. That happens sometimes, but I would say more rarely.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, we had a partner on one thing. It's like every draft, it could be like draft 10 of episode 3, like every draft would be like 5 pages, single spaced notes, like on everything.
Nightmare.
And we do all these notes, hand it back in, another 5 pages, single spaced notes. Oh. We turn in another draft, 5 pages. Like, it was just like, there was a point at which. And
no compliments either, right? That's the other thing. Is like, you have to, what manager does not realize you have to start with what's good? Notes, like say you get the email or the call, if it's being run well, the executives are always going to start with, this was what was great. We love this. And they'll give a list of what they love and a list of the changes they love. They'll start with the positive, and then, there's a little pause, and then, get into but to just begin with 5 pages of notes and not even a how do you do.
Written like a series of complaints. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that can really hurt the heart to engage in that over and over. And yet we were able to make a much better show as a result of those notes. Even though, I would have preferred a different tone. I would have preferred they were less arbitrary, I guess. I would have preferred, the notes would have been done differently on that specific, like usually notes are, delightful. They do the, nice things and with some, things to consider in the middle, you know what I mean? Like usually that's, in the modern era, that's the way, but
that's how you build trust, right?
That's how you build trust. Or, Drew and I, we did test screenings on a bunch of our movies and boy, you want the straight unvarnished truth, man. Like
read those cards.
Yeah, read those cards, or sit in the back of the room and they don't realize you're sitting in the room and they're just like, this movie's stupid. It reminds me of a stupid movie I saw a long time ago. I hated this, and you're sitting here like just sitting there taking it, trying not to act like you're being
or everyone's
gutted.
on their phone, like texting through the whole movie, and then they're going to write some card that's going to force you to like change the whole ending of your movie, even though they're not even like paying attention at all. That's a
you see the little glowing screens. You're like, oh, like, this is horrible, and. Yeah, in the test screenings, I would literally just count my breaths, just like breath in 1, breath out 2, breath in 3,
ouch.
And just count breaths to 10 over and over because it was just so stressful. And you go through that enough times, but but we've gotten really terrible notes from those and made great changes. And and you can be like, well, that person didn't get the movie, or that person, like, well, if the person didn't get the movie, like, maybe it's not clear enough. And maybe you need to clarify some things. So they do, you know what I mean? It's not their fault that they're having notes or problems. So let's talk through the process. Maybe we talk this in three parts. So maybe taking the notes in, like what a notes call or something like that looks like, how to process them, and then delivering the new draft and how to account for those notes in the process of redelivery.
And let's get kind of granular.
Yeah. So taking the notes in, Stacey, you want to run with that?
Yeah, we're actually in the process of this right now, which is why today's songs were extra bad, because normally on Thursday mornings during my meditation, I think about what the song's going to be. Today, I was just thinking about these notes that we're turning around. So, and we were like, should we not mention the people by name? Should we just call them the producers, the studio, the network? But then we decided they're such excellent partners. Their notes are so good. they're so cool that, all we're going to say is good stuff. So it's okay to say we're going to be talking about a project we're working on with the Tannenbaum Company. They're the producers, and Lionsgate, they're the studio, and Hulu, they're the network. And I think that's an important thing to mention, because for all these notes, you have to sort of go through 3 passes of it. At least we do at this moment. Who knows? Maybe at some point, 2 of those entities will gather their notes together down the line. That's possible. But it begins, for example, with, I turn in a draft. It goes to the producers first. And then they can either choose to email their notes, or they can say, hey, let's set up a call or a Zoom. And I'm going to be perfectly honest here. Even though they're lovely people, I always prefer getting the email, because the email means, hey, we've only got a couple of things and they're so small and easy. We're just going to send them to you in a doc. Whereas if somebody's like, great, let's get on a call, immediately my hands turn icy cold. I'm like, they hate me. They need to say it in person. there are so many notes that they have to do it via Zoom, And even
sometimes
we'll
they
dissect
email it
it.
because they don't even want to look at your stupid face. Like, we're just going to email you how terrible this is because we hate you now and we don't even want to waste our time with you. So there's there's that side too,
It's straight, and I think they know that too, because when they were so anyway, it went to Tannenbaum. I took their notes. We looked at it, the 3 of us looked at it together in-house, kicked it back to Tannenbaum Company. They say, we like it. And then we don't. They pass it up to Lionsgate, and then so that's the next step up. And then Lionsgate, in this instance, said, "Hey, let's jump on a Zoom." And they were kind enough to go, just because it's been a minute, we just want to say hi, but so they were basically saying, "Don't worry, the fact that we're meeting, in person over Zoom, it shouldn't be taken as a bad sign." So this was this yesterday?
Yesterday, yeah.
So it was yesterday. So then as you go up those levels, everybody still joins. So even though this was a Zoom with Lionsgate and they were leading the notes and these were their notes on the draft, everyone from Tannenbaum Company is still there. So, and I'm sure next time when it's Hulu giving the notes, I'm sure everyone from Lionsgate and everyone from Tannenbaum Company will be there. So your Zoom boxes just get smaller and smaller as the meeting gets bigger and bigger. And it's always fun to see who takes the lead on stuff and who does the speaking for the notes. And sometimes that shifts from person to person.
But yeah, to your point, Stacey, I think that's especially on episode 1.
Yes.
At the beginning of the process, it's very regimented, going up the levels from producers to studio to network. As you get deeper in a show, you tend to, at least we always try to say, hey, can we combine the studio network as one collective pass? And that can, save a lot of time.
Yes.
And that can be, it's hard to do that, on episode 1, but if you're in a room and you're in episode 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever,
Right.
I think everybody kind of starts to how do we streamline this a little bit more? And especially if the studio and the network are creatively, pretty simpatico, that can really help save a step.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, as everyone's figuring out what the show is and stuff, the first episode or 2 or 3, everyone's going to want to see it, individually and have a moment to just make sure, you know what I mean? Every one of the, and if you're I'm going to save a step and just email it to everyone, that doesn't go well. That doesn't go well. People get mad. You know what I mean? People feel wait. You need to show it to us first so we can put eyes on it before you send it to the next the next rung, and trying to skip that step, or I feel like people like being part of the process, and television is a collective art form. It's not a one person art form, no matter who you are. You know what I mean? You're always going to have so many people, working on it. It's not like painting by yourself, in a room somewhere. It's a collective art form, and the producers, studio, and network are all going to want to, be involved. And you can fight that and make yourself crazy, or you can embrace that and use that to your benefit.
Yeah, and I think at the very, the core of it too, with the producers, studio, network, I think they just want to know that they're being heard more than anything else. More than, did they take my note? Did they not take my note? They want to know that you hear them and you're considering it. And if you're consistently dismissing, one level of this process, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for you, and they're going to make you, pay for that. But I think, it really isn't about how many notes you take at the end of the day, or, it's just about really letting them know, like, I heard your note, I tried it, whatever that may be, but just really focus on making sure they know that you hear them.
And at risk of too much butt kissing and apple polishing, which is they're also, these folks have like potentially a lot of knowledge. They potentially, the producers, the executives, they know TV really well. They have a passion for storytelling. That's why they chose this instead of, say, being an agent or something. And also, they're your first audience. Eventually when you're in a room, like say you're working on a pilot, a lot of that is solo work where you're like, you don't really know what you're doing. In a room, you're going to have that first audience of, you're going to throw out a pitch, and some people in the room will go like, yeah, oh, yes, and, or they'll go, huh. You can feel how your ideas go in a room. I'd say executives are kind of that first audience, because a lot of times the notes they're asking for are like, more of that. That change you made, we like that. Can we have just a little more of that? That's somebody's favorite kind of note.
Well, I think too, like, studios, networks, like you may learn over the course of your career, like what doesn't work by making the, doing things, writing things, creating things that people don't like. Oh, when my lead actor cries in the first act, the audience hates that or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's things you learn over time, but they've had like, 100 things in the time you've had 2. And they've seen firsthand so many things that don't work, or so many things that caused problems. And, sometimes, sure, they've learned, maybe the wrong lessons from that. Like, oh, people hate movies with dogs in it or whatever. It could be way too broad, but they've also learned, oh, this doesn't play. I had a test grading went terribly because of this thing, and they can really save you from a lot of your own problems that you may want to incorporate into and there's always a different way to do it.
There's also, that's for when your show's actually up and running and your goal is to make the best show possible to connect with the audience as deeply and hopefully as broadly as possible. But there's also that first goal, which is like, just get made, get a green light,
Yeah.
And certainly they have a lot of experience, because how many shows are in development? How many shows die in development, potentially for a small reason, potentially, for a little problem that they could solve ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what would you say? I mean, just for context, like, there's shows that are, you go out and pitch a show, and that rare occasion that you get picked up to series means like, okay, we're not only buying the show from you, but we're committing to making it. And that's rare. Most shows are picked up what they call into development. Means, Netflix is going to buy your show and they want to develop it with you. And so all they're really committed to doing is maybe paying you for a pilot episode and to develop it until they make a decision whether they want to either greenlight a whole writer's room and write the whole season, or whether they want to greenlight, a path to production to actually making it. But I mean, what would you say, John, you think in terms of percentages shows that are picked up into development that get made?
10%?
10%. I'd say 10 to 20, maybe less than 10, maybe we'd be surprised. Maybe it's 5, so, so to Stacey's point, you get something in development. Just knowing what those odds really are, you can make a living, just writing
it's true.
pilots and development that never get made. You can make a living doing that. But, when you go home
A
for
lot of people
Thanksgiving,
do.
you can't tell anyone, what you're working on. Like no one will know, no one will have seen anything because nothing actually gets made. So when you're in that development phase, you really want to be thinking of like, what is it that they need, to press that button? You're like, what?
Right.
And you need to kind of, act accordingly, just knowing that, it's a binary thing. It either becomes a show or it doesn't, it's one or the other. And you should kind of do everything in your power to make it something that gets made.
Simply put, I don't want to write pilots for a living. I want to make TV shows for a living.
Exactly.
Exactly. And you would think that'd be obvious, but I think there are probably a lot of people who don't feel that way, who are like, no, writing pilots for a living is fantastic. And if something goes to air, great. But we have seen firsthand amongst ourselves and then amongst our friend group that nothing gets your career cooking like actually having something made. When you've got a good career going and a good reputation on paper, that's one thing. You're here. And then if anything gets made, even if it's your least favorite project, even whatever it is, boom, you go up there.
It's true. Even
Yeah.
if it doesn't do like crazy business and it's like
Yeah.
just a decent show that's just out there on
Yes.
a streaming platform of any kind, or it's just available to see. Just it existing in the world is a
Yes.
huge, feather in your cap, and it's a huge, a lot of momentum in your career versus, just a bunch of
means
scripts on
you can do
shelves. Yeah, it means you can do it.
It means you can do it because you've done it once before.
Yeah, exactly.
And people want to bet on people who have done the thing,
Yes.
and you never know, like, Joe Pickett came from Waco. Like, we did Waco, we got that to air, and the producers of Joe Pickett had this book, Joe Pickett, and they saw Waco and they said, it'd be great doing this series is these guys. And so, the work started coming to us as a, you know what I mean? Not completely. We still have to, push, every day, but, getting it, getting that one thing made really helped us turn a corner in a lot of ways. And to Drew's point, I love that, just having that mentality of it's binary. Like, either this becomes a show or it doesn't become a show. And if that is your focus and your objective, whether to dig your heels in on this specific line of dialogue, like, none of that is, you can have the most perfect dialogue in a script in a show that never gets made, or you can, be willing to improv a little and move things around a little and try things in not giving them a great reason to say no at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean just do everything exactly what they ask. Okay, I'm just going to do everything they ask for, no matter what, that's not a path to getting it done either. They don't, it's a lot of pressure on the execs. If every note they give you, you do exactly letter of the law, like exactly what they asked for. Because then they're like, oh, what if I give a note that breaks it? They want to know you're filtering it through your judgment and through your,
That's right.
through your craft and your skill. Like, they don't want it delivered. And we've had this experience. Like, we give notes to a writer, they do exactly the notes, but nothing makes any sense. You're like, well, this note, like,
You have
this
to
scene
change
doesn't
the
make
line that goes into it and out of it. You can't just plunk it in there and not change the setup or the payoff. It's like, yes, I can.
Yeah. And in fact, like,
Watch me.
I remember, getting a draft from a writer doing that. It's like literally everything exactly as asked and not a thing more, where nothing made any sense. And it just really felt like the writers being like, F you, F you, I'll do your stupid notes. But they're obviously
what you
checked
asked for.
out of,
Yes.
it's what you asked for. This what you want? Are these the notes you want? You know what I mean? But that's not the game. That's not the game to play. The game to play is, how do I make these execs know I heard them? And to Drew's point earlier, like, to let them know you hear them. Like, I've been on notes calls where you hear a writer like, oh yeah. No. I already did. I was going to do that anyway. Or, or, oh, this doesn't work. We already talked about it. That won't work. Like, or you see like defensiveness, or, oh, this character would never do something like that.
Like in the notes call.
Yeah.
Right in the notes call. And you're like, that's not the strategy I like to
don't do
employ. And I recommend to everyone we work with, like, in the notes call, like, you can listen, you can ask questions like, oh, when you say this, do you mean it more at the start of the scene or what part of the scene? Like, to really draw out what they're saying so that they feel really listened to and really heard. And you can say like, oh, I like that. That's really interesting. Or that's a really, like, I hadn't thought of something like that. Like, let us play around with that.
Nobody wants to see you come up with an answer on the spot.
No.
They are not expecting you to. They do not want you to. What I do is a lot of times, like yesterday, for example, when we were getting notes, like, to be honest, I know the script backwards and forwards. So as soon as they gave a note, boom, I had an idea. Again, bad pitch, not a great idea, but I had to solve right away. So I might say something like, "Oh, good, yeah, I have a cool idea for how to do that. I'm going to circle back with John and Drew." And they want to know that you're now. I think it's okay to say that, like, "Oh, I've got an idea for that." Or even yesterday, I was like, "Okay, I like that note. I don't actually know where to do it yet, but we'll figure it out. We'll
figure
come
it
up
out.
with something,
Yeah.
and we will, and we did."
Yeah.
But so it's okay to say that. It's also, I've noticed that you guys, when you guys are leading it, you tend to not ask many questions. You just sort of go, good, got it. Because you guys have gotten so good at knowing what the note behind the note is that you don't really have to ask. I'm newer to this, so and I love to talk, so I actually go ahead and do a little bit more than you do of like, okay, so you say that you want this, like, say, for example, you want to show that you want to show more human, warm moments with this character. Does it matter to you who that's with or where that happens, or are we just free to put it wherever we want, And they might have some thoughts about it because, for example, that character, the main character, they had notes, the producers had notes last week saying, hey, we'd like to see a warm moment with her and her children. We want to see her be a good mom at least once. Okay, great, got it. And now we're getting a similar note of like, we are so glad you added that warmth. We'd like even more of it. And then I feel free to go, do you care if it's, with her as a mom or as a wife or just as a sister? Like, does it matter? And then like, no, really just wherever. You know what I mean? So I tend to ask for more feedback than you guys do, but I just want to make this clear to everyone. I do not do it defensively. I'm not asking questions as an excuse to show how stupid their idea is.
Yeah,
it's not like, well, where do you want it? I mean, do you care if it's this or that? It's not that at all. It's literally asking for clarity while at the same time assuring them that, like, if left to our own devices, we'll come up with something cool, but just so I know exactly what you're asking for, and then I'll ask for clarity.
I think that's great too. I think that absolutely serves the same most important purpose of making sure they feel heard. And it's not like you're coddling them in a way. These are all really, smart professionals typically. And, but again, if you're asking for more feedback, you're just, illustrating that you really care about, their thoughts and you hear them. And I think that is simply the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're all the doctors. There's a patient on the table. The patient is the script. We're all doctors.
Yeah.
If you're like, well, I was gonna, staple the spleen, but like I tried that and the stapler doesn't work, whatever. Like if you're that doctor, you're gonna kill your patient, Whereas
First of all, you should not be stapling your spleen.
Yeah. I've never done a medical show, and I probably shouldn't start. But yeah, that the idea of like you can be defensive, like in your heart. But really, like, if you're like, you don't have to commit to anything on the call. Like, and
yes,
but I would say I would avoid being like, well, we can try that, but don't know if that's going to work. Like, you don't have to do any of that. Don't do any of that in the call. In the call, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. I like that. Like, oh, I have an idea for something we could try. And later you could come back and be like, hey, we tried that. It felt out of place. Like, we tried it and this is the reason we didn't feel like that actually worked. You can always come back to it. But if you don't force them into a defensive position as they're delivering the note, they won't dig in the same way as if you fight them right out of the gate. Or
oh my God! And why would you fight them in public when they're surrounded by their, I think simply put, I think a lot of writers have big egos, but also fragile egos. It's like, I'm a genius. No, I'm a fraud. I'm a genius. No, I'm a fraud. And I think one of the ways it shows up is I think a lot of writers think they are so much smarter than execs. And I think that tone of defensiveness / smugness sometimes shows. I'm like, okay, if you want the character to be likable, you can show if you have a low opinion of them, they can tell. Cool it.
That's it. And there's not that many exec jobs. The execs that survive are usually pretty smart,
Yes.
And the thing that you don't realize until you've do a few rounds, a few years of TV series, is that these execs move around, more than like football coaches. I swear to God, whoever we always joke, like whoever we start a show with is never there at the end, and you might think, okay, then that's less reason to take their notes. It's actually no. It's the opposite is true. I think it's more reason to leave an impression, no matter how long they're involved. I think their intentions are to make the show better. But the reality is they're going to end up at the next network or studio that you're trying to get something made at. And you look at how these people spread around, and it's a really good thing if you're good at that kind of network studio diplomacy, then you're going to have a friend at other places that you've never worked at before, just because of how these execs, the revolving door of executives in
and
the business.
A friend who has probably risen up the ranks, and a friend who one of the first things they're supposed to do at their new job is demonstrate how many good relationships they've created with how many talented people. You know, didn't you guys just have a meeting at Amazon, right? With an executive you worked with?
Yeah, that we used to
somewhere
work
else.
with.
Yeah.
I had a lunch today with someone who was the head of a studio we used to work with on another TV thing, and is now running a different studio. And it's that we've never worked with before on the TV side. So
cool.
It's really it's cool. The ones that are good do survive, but they tend to move around a lot. And that
True.
If you're
Very
a
true.
good partner, that will serve you well.
Yeah, your reputation is the most important thing. Like, if you're honest, if you're open, you treat, execs and the other people you work with like human beings. You don't go around screaming on set and belittling people. Like, you know what I mean? If you hold yourself well, like that kind of idea that your character is your destiny, like that is definitely true for a career.
Absolutely.
If you're an awful person to work with, you have one miss and you're done. If you're a good person to work with, you might be able to miss, every once in a while, and it'll be okay because people will want to work with you regardless. And you don't plan on having misses, but if you do enough work, you will have misses, and that's just part of it. And
and the misses might not even be shows that make it to air but aren't hits. It could even just be stuff that you're developing. You've got this passion project and you're developing it, and you do that a few times in a row, and it turns out it's not connecting with buyers. That's just not what people want at the moment or something.
Yeah.
That can be the miss. Let's talk about processing the notes. So we talked about whether it's an email or a Zoom or a call, getting the notes, being cool. But now you said, okay, bye, have a great weekend. We'll get this to you soon. Now what do you do?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. There's, one thing we like to look for is the note behind the note in things. Like, there's sometimes when the note is very clear, it's very, direct. It's like, can you end the, episode here instead of there? Or it's like something, and that might be well, that works great. Let's do that. Or it might be like, well, what they're feeling is the back end of the script is dragging a little. And what if we thin out everything before that? So, the original end we have is still the end, but it's 5 minutes earlier in the script, whatever. Like, there's all these different ways of doing a thing. And then you can say, like, we feel like what you were reacting to is there was 3, slow scenes in a row. We removed 2 of them to move up the ending, but we really want this to be the cliffhanger or whatever. Like, something you can count to. A lot of people like to say the rule of thirds. A third, you take a third of their notes exactly as written. A third of the notes is a variation of what they've asked for, and a third of the notes you don't do, and have a reason why you don't.
Yeah.
Right.
We like to try everything, and we like to challenge, ourselves and the writers we work with, like, to try, like, let's do every note and then see in the script which ones do and don't feel like they fit, instead of it being like, well, that'll never work and that'll never work. Like, sometimes just the process of trying the bad version even of a note makes you go, oh, actually, this is great. Like, I didn't know how, like, this note sounded like bad on paper, but now that I'm trying it, I really like it. What do you guys think of this? And I feel like just trying all of them really helps.
Yeah.
This is something where being able to be articulate about your own craft and having partners you like working with can be really helpful, because then you can, like, say, for example, I was taking one of the notes yesterday and saying to the guys, like, hey, I really like this moment. This change is cool. However, does it deflate the tension? Because I want maximum tension going into the next scene. And I'm not willing to add like a happy, cheerful moment there if it's going to deflate the tension. That's a bigger deal. Being able to analyze your own work, and then you can actually talk about it and go, no, actually, this choice will actually increase the tension, or whatever it is. It's nice to be able to take a step back and analyze your work and discuss it amongst your writer group like that.
Yeah.
That was not an articulate way of talking about being articulate.
Well, I'll say, to your point, like, that comes with craft, that comes with time, and that comes with craft. Like, early on, often it's like, well, why is this scene here? Well, I don't know. I liked it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like
it's funny.
It's funny. I thought it was neat, or whatever. Like, I'm imitating myself, in my earlier days, not, but like, but you can't necessarily articulate why something is the way it is. And I think as time goes on, you start to think of the scenes. I mean, maybe write intuitively, but then are able to analyze the reason for the scene, why it's there, why it's in that position, why it starts where it does and ends where it does. You know what I mean? Like, and have reasons for shifting things. But within that, like, I feel like as craft builds, you're more comfortable being able to analyze and move things around in a way that doesn't break anything.
I've got one about the opposite of the note behind the note, because certainly sometimes there's a note behind the note and you can find it. Everybody goes, yes, that's what we meant. But sometimes there's just a note. And sometimes it's real clear, and sometimes it's about something you like. This happens to be pretty often where I like things quirky, I like them weird, and I have a taste for the gross. I like things a little gross, and other people don't as much, and that's something I bump up against a lot. So for example, I had the main character picking a wedgie, and the network didn't like that. And for a moment, I'm like, but she's going to pick the wedgie in a cute way. It's funny. Why isn't it, and then just going, let it go, Stace. Are you really going to let this project die because you want to protect that wedgie? Fuck the wedgie. Does that make sense?
I was going to make a point, that I'd love to expand on right there is also knowing like they didn't like it. They probably are thinking about casting. They're probably thinking,
yes,
we want a great actress to play this. She probably wants to be sexy and we feel like we're making fun of her. Or she's going to be like gross or overweight or something like, it doesn't, it's not helpful for casting, but knowing that like there's a difference between what ends up on the page and what you end up shooting too, and knowing like
right,
in that shot we'll be there and we'll say, hey, you know what, let's grab that little wedgie moment, and it might be something we really like, but just knowing that there's you could still not saying you can go rogue and shoot scenes that don't exist or shoot a bunch of dialogue that's not on the page, but like when it comes to visuals and stuff like that, kind of keeping track of those things and saying, I still want to try to do that and see if that works.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love that.
The same is true like with the notes. We found sometimes like, if they really don't like a certain thing or think this one thing's unnecessary, if it doesn't change your shooting day really, and it doesn't change story, where like if you could either remove it in post or keep it in and it won't really change anything, then it's a perfectly acceptable thing, to say, hey, we'd love to just try it. Like, we get it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, we'll nip it out in post and it'll be no harm, no foul. It won't be, 2 extra hours on the day or anything. It's just baked into the scene and we'll shoot it. And if you don't like it, then we'll take it out. Yeah, I think that's a perfectly acceptable way to let them feel heard and also get the thing that you still kind of want. And then, the proof will be in the pudding at the end of the day. It'll be clear to all whether it was, worth keeping or not. And then you can always, edit things out,
Yeah. And then to shoot it in such a way, or make sure it's covered in such a way that could be nipped out. Like, like we've definitely worked with, like a director, like, oh yeah, I'll give it to you lots of different ways. And we're like, okay, but we need to be able to pull this out. And then it's a oneer. And it's like, it's really hard to edit that one thing out. And I think,
and
that's part of
intentional.
Intentional, like, hamstringing you, where like playing those kinds of games, that's not, we like the mentality of like, play long-term games with long-term people. Like all these execs, all these people you're working with, they're going to be around. They're going to be around 30 years from now, and they could be your lifeline. They could be a great ally to you. But if you're showing them that you'll be like, oh yeah, I'll make sure we cover it in such a way that we can just nip that out. But then you give them one option and the only option is, not what you discussed. Like that shows poorly. And
that's not what you're talking about though, Drew, right? You're talking about like shoot it.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And we're just letting them know, reminding them. Sometimes I think there could be a tendency to want to make it perfect on the page. And it's got to be perfect before we shoot it, but just always kind of the gentle reminder sometimes like, hey, you know what? I still think it's going to work. We'll cover it. And if you don't like it in the cut, I'll just take it out. And you're suggesting a willingness to remove it, but you just want to try it, and then we can remove it later. And you're not saying it has to be. It's kind of almost like, let me show you. And if you still don't like it, I'll take it out and I won't complain about it. And
This reminds me of our episode that was about like the 3 reasons to have a pilot, or the 75 lives of your pilot, or so, something like that. This is at the stage we're early in the development stage. The purpose right now is to get a green light or get a series order and get a cast. So, for example, I had the words muffin top skank. Like I described the character as a muffin top skank, which I think is awesome. I would love to play a muffin top skank. That would be amazing. But the average amazing actress I shouldn't call them like an A-list actress who we want to say this, probably won't want to play a muffin top skank. So you scratch that out. You get cast, whatever.
You just never know. And like, I think a lot of notes, you do find that, especially the pilot episode, you'll see a lot of notes that are just really careful about how characters are described. And oftentimes, a little less is more because it might appeal to more actors. And casting is so like, important, and it's, a show's getting made or not made. We talked about development, the binary situation of it. Like often it flips to a show getting made based solely on what actor you're able to convince to do the show. And so you see a lot of care taken toward how those characters are described to make sure, a actor or actress doesn't read, the first 2 pages and be like, wait, what? I got, missing a tooth and I don't want to do this,
Decrepit, sleazy, hate them.
Ragged.
Oh, God.
Let's get into the third step of the process, is delivering the new draft. And one thing Drew and I have done, and this isn't, we didn't invent the idea, but one thing we've done for years, but both in editorial and in scripts and just kind of every step along the way, to furthering to Drew's point, like making sure they feel heard, is we do what a note stock. So we take their notes and we just print out their notes, and then we insert, like our initials and just write done, or like done is our favorite. Like, this note, done. This note, done. This note, done. We sort of chart those, and then we'll have kind of, the, like not writing defensively, you know what I mean? Like writing respectfully, but like some of the others, like, hey, we tried this, but we felt like it seemed to slow down the scene in a way that didn't feel, helpful to us. Happy to discuss further. And just kind of leave it at that. And if they want to discuss further, it's not saying this didn't work, this didn't, it's a discussion. It's always a conversation.
It's great in those docs to have done, because you're just building trust, right? You're saying like, I listened to you, I took it, here it is. But you could also do something that's like, adjusted the scene for pace or massage it or whatever. Like, so you can have something that's not quite done, but that addresses it somehow. I like to do it. I put that part in caps, right? Like, adjusted the pace, put that in caps. And then I go into an explanation of like, I tried the note as blah, blah, blah. Like basically saying I tried it the way you guys asked for it. I found that it made things a little bit too dry or a little bit too slow or whatever. So what I did was for example, they were saying, hey, less devices recently. So, but we decided to keep the voiceover and not get rid of it. But we said what we did was, we adjusted it. Yes, we kept the voiceover, but we thinned it out. We got rid of all the spoilers. We turned it, saying we addressed it, we changed it, but we kept it.
Yeah. We got rid of, breaking the fourth wall. There's these 3 devices we got rid of. This one we thinned out and we clarified, happy to discuss further. You know what I mean? And then
exactly.
And it becomes just part of the process. And, and over the course of time,
if they've emailed you notes, I just want to jump in and say, if they've actually emailed you the notes, because you know how we talked about, maybe they'll email them, maybe it's a notes call, maybe it's a Zoom. If they've emailed you, you can literally just use their document as the basis of your document that you're sending back to them.
Correct,
However, if it's like yesterday where it was a Zoom, I took notes during the Zoom. I've turned those into a doc, and then I could use some form of that, that they asked for 4 things, and, you can type it up in a Word doc and address it within that.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you do these, keep them all. Keep everything. Like, I like to keep everything. So much of this communication is going to happen via email, but then you're going to be looking for this shit later, and you're not going to be able to find it in your email. It's going to drive you nuts. So I save it all in a series of, lovingly named folders.
Yeah. And then for, the people out there that have a show that does get going and everything, the exact same process exists in editorial. You'll get, you'll deliver, the showrunner cut of episode 1. They'll email you, 40 notes, and we do the same exact thing. Just, respond in each one. Done. And honestly, if you do anything to address a note, we just call it done and let them go look at it and see it, kind of with fresh eyes and see if they agree that it's done. But you don't have to over explain everything. It's really, you kind of have to just explain it when you tried something that didn't work and why it didn't work, but
so less is more.
Yeah. Less words is more, I think, on the responses, but it's a good kind of format to communicate with in both the script phase and in editorial as well.
And if you're writing this from a place of defensiveness, that'll come across. So I would just recommend doing it in a way that's, you're respecting your partners, you're writing it out. It's not like, well, we tried changing this line, but it didn't work because the end of the scene says this other line.
Yeah.
They might be like, well, you could change that line too if you really wanted to give this a fair shot. You know what I mean?
John, that's an excellent reminder that tone can be hard to communicate written. We've all had texts or emails.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why less is more, because if you're getting into, 7 sentences via an email, that's probably going to sound defensive.
Yeah, that's true.
And it probably, the longer it goes, the more defensive it's probably going to sound, just as a general.
And to be honest, the more defensive it probably is.
Yeah.
That's true.
No, it's true. It's true. Yeah. And, to that point, Drew and I will often, especially with new partners or, if it's a contested episode or something, Drew and I will often read each other's notes docs and just make sure we take out any language that almost treat it like a draft of a script or something. Take out any language that might sound like this word sounds a little defensive. Can we change it to that word? And we'll do that for each other just to, make sure, I don't know, there's that, what is the book? The nonviolent, The Art of Nonviolent Communication, or it's called something like that. And it's a great book on just how to speak in ways that is disarming, not aggressive. And I find that kind of mentality, like adopting some of that is really, really helpful. So in summary, we talked about taking notes, processing notes, delivering, notes, and really making studios, networks feel heard and doing good work for yourself and your project. That's what we covered this week.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah,
Notes are a big part of the business. Thanks, everyone. If you like our show, subscribe to it, rate it highly, share it with your friends, get a tattoo. Put the tattoo on Instagram. I don't know. Make a TikTok that's where you play us for Halloween. That would be amazing. And also, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Bye.